one big challenge in pre-sales and technical sales is if and when to invest your resources on specific projects. So say for example you have a software solution, it rarely just fits a client's needs. There's always going to need to be some kind of adaptation, maybe a few glue guns here and there just to make sure that everything works perfectly. Here's the problem. When do you decide which of these projects are going to receive how much resources? Because resources are finite. You're not going to be able to service the need of the entire planet. So you have to draw the line. How do you do that though? Well, here are the few of the factors that I would consider. So first of all, obviously, how large is your project and how large are the investments that are required in order to get the project. So obviously, if your revenues here are pretty low, but the investments are pretty big, it's probably not a good idea, right? On the other side, maybe that you have something with limited investments that you need to make, but the payoff is actually pretty big. So that's the opposite. Obviously, most of the projects sit somewhere in the middle, so like you have to make a judgment call on that. Here's another factor, maintainability. Who is going to maintain that? Is that something that is just hanging by the thread and will need somebody to constantly watch over it? Or is that something that you feel is going to be relatively stable and thus the maintenance over the long run is not going to be problematic? It's especially important if you, as the pre-sales group, is actually saying that you're going to be taking care of that, because keep in mind, you need to be making numbers, and then the more time that you're spending in those kind of skunk work maintenance, and the less you have to sell, and that's a bad thing. Here's another factor. How does it fit with the long-term goals that product management or R&D has? Because obviously, if you have a project that requires you to, make sure that things happen a little bit earlier, but you still wanted to do these things anyway, it's markedly different than if what you're going to do goes into a completely different direction. So that's another factor. And then finally, one of the very important thing is whether that investment will unlock multiple accounts and multiple projects, or it's something that is really just for that customer, that project, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't want to take that project, even if it's really specific to your customer, but does it need to be paying you more? Certainly. I mean, the threshold of pain in that case is much higher, and thus the payoff should be higher. But again, those are all trade-offs. It's sometimes difficult to decide which way to go. You do want to discuss with your product management, you do want to discuss with sales. Obviously, sometimes you will have to tell them no, unfortunately, but not because you don't want to grow the business. That's what is really important here, is that you have to communicate the message very clearly that no, you're all for taking business. It's just that at some point in time you have opportunity costs and trade-offs that you have to calculate. So let me know what you think in comments, and that's probably going to be my last video from the vacation here in Eastern Quebec. You should visit. When it's not raining, it's great.